It's not you. It's the speech. Many speakers believe that the goal of a keynote speech, or really any form of communication, is understanding. They think, as long as people understand it, I've succeeded. Most talks do not achieve that. You listen to them talk and you just go, I just have no idea what they're talking about. And more importantly, I don't know what this speaker wants me to do with this information. If the experts do not figure out how to do this, their ideas die with them.
So Brian, you wrote a book.
I did. I wrote a book.
All right.
Another book.
How would you frame this one for anyone who's walking past the shelf, sees the cover, and says, oh, I wonder what that's about?
Yeah, so the book's called The One-Page Keynote, How to Design a Talk That Always Works, No Charisma Required. So this book is really for experts, industry leaders, folks who know a lot about a topic and are either asked to speak on their topic or want to speak more publicly on their topic. And they know so much about what they do that when they sit down to write what has to be a 20-minute or 30-minute presentation, they have no idea which pieces to include, what should be in there, what the order should be. Do I include data, stats, studies? Should I tell stories? There's this blank page, and it really gets in people's heads. And a lot of times what happens is that they end up saying no to good speaking opportunities because they're nervous that they're not going to get it right, or they're nervous that they're not a good enough performer, a charismatic presenter, and so therefore they can't do a good job of giving a keynote speech. And I define keynote speech as anything that's like 20 minutes or longer where all eyes are on you, the room is quiet and staring at you, and you're giving a talk for 20 minutes or more.
Right, so how does the book help them?
Yeah, the book helps them by giving them an explicit structure that basically says if you follow this structure exactly, you are guaranteed that the talk works. You're not guaranteed that it's the most incredibly exciting talk anyone's ever given. You're not guaranteed a standing ovation. You're not guaranteed belly laughs. You are guaranteed that the talk works. And then we kind of have to talk about, what do I mean by it works? Right. Right? So I'll do your follow-up question for you. What do we mean by it works? What I mean is this. Many speakers believe, or many communicators believe, that the goal of a keynote speech, or really any form of communication, is understanding. They think, as long as people understand it, I've succeeded. And for me, that's table stakes. That is the bare minimum that communication should achieve, is that they understand it. Now, having said that, most talks do not achieve that. Even though they should be table stakes, most speakers that we watch, you listen to them talk and you just go, I just have no idea what they're talking about. And more importantly, I don't know what this speaker wants me to do with this information. So this structure helps them deliver a talk that people understand, but more importantly, it helps them deliver a talk that moves the audience to action. It helps people do something new as a result of the communication.
What about those speakers who think, I've got this, I know how to explain this, and it's important for everybody to understand all the steps it took for me to get here and my methodology and everything before they even go into the topic itself?
Right, so essentially what you're asking about is there are folks who are actually pretty comfortable on stage and they know their topic inside and out. And so they might wonder, well, what do I need this for, right? What is this going to help me do? So there are two different things. It's what do I include in the talk? And then the second question, which is one almost nobody asks, which is what order should the things be in the talk? And what I think a lot of speakers and communicators more broadly, particularly experts, do not realize is how much the order of the ideas matters for the audience to be able to run with it. In other words, many speakers deliver all the right points, just in the wrong order. And so what happens is when you're sitting there in the audience, if you've ever listened to a speaker and you think, this is interesting, and that's interesting, and that was funny, and this is interesting, and then you get to the end of the speech and you just kind of have no idea what you heard, you don't really know what to do with it, it just kind of didn't add up to anything, I would argue that many times what has just happened is that they delivered all of the right things, but not in the order that you needed to follow the logic and do something with it. And so what the structure is designed to do is to answer the questions that the audience is already asking themselves and in the order that they're asking them. the thesis of the book is we want to build our communication audience first. We think, who are they? What are they thinking? What questions are they asking? And then if you simply answer the questions that the audience is quietly asking in their heads during the speech and in the order they're asking, then it feels like magic. When you see a speaker who does that, it feels like they're reading your mind. They know, you think, oh, I just heard them say something. I wonder what, and then the speaker answers that question. You're like, this is great. And then it goes, but that makes me think of, and then they answer that question. That is what makes for an engaging speech. And the good news is, audiences answer, or they ask rather, audiences ask the same 8 questions in the same order when there's a keynote speaker on stage every time. So this book is, here are those questions, and here's how to answer them.
So obviously the question in my head now is, what are the 8 questions?
What are the 8 questions? Okay, so the very first thing that people think when you walk up on stage is, should I pay attention to this? It's the relevance question. It's, is this relevant to me? This is kind of the what do sales trainers, they used to say in like the 80s, like WeFM or whatever, what's in it for me, right? And there's some truth in that. I think sometimes when you hear the what's in it for me, it sounds like people are very selfish. It's not true. They're not really, it's not that they're being selfish, because it might not be, when they say what's in it for me, it's not necessarily what am I personally going to get out of it, it's what can I use in my life from this? So this information might be useful because I have a friend who needs to hear about this, or because the folks at my office need to hear about this. Like, there has to be some connection for the audience member to the topic at hand. In other words, when they ask the question, should I pay attention to this? Mostly these days, what they're really doing is they're on their phones waiting for somebody to walk up on stage. They're on Instagram or email or LinkedIn or whatever they're doing, and then someone's introduced and they kind of do this like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to pay attention now. And they're like this. They've got their phone here and they're just waiting for you to prove that they can go back to their emails and ignore you. I mean, that really is what's happening. And so within seconds of hitting the stage, you must answer the question, should I pay attention to this? With a resounding, yes, you must pay attention to this.
Yeah. So how is this relevant for me?
Right. Yeah. How is this relevant for me?
Where do we go from here?
All right. So after you've answered that question by delivering something that tells them, yes, this is something that is worth paying attention to, it might be worth paying attention to, but then they have to ask, does this really matter? Does this really matter? In other words, there are many things in our lives that are a problem. We're aware of the problem. It is relevant to us, and yet we just decide it's not worth solving. It's too expensive, it takes too much time, it's gonna make me do something new. There's so many of us would rather continue doing something that doesn't work, but we already know how to do it, than learn something new in order to resolve a problem. There are many problems that are problems, but they're not big enough or urgent enough to warrant our attention at this moment. Because there are more pressing things. I mean, like, when I moved into a house in, many years ago, I moved into a house in Connecticut, and we found out that the water line in the fridge was broken. And I thought to myself, that's a pain. I wish I could, get the water straight from the fridge. It's super convenient. But we figured we'll fix it someday, or we'll get a new fridge someday, or we won't, whatever. And so I didn't fix it. And then I was on a work trip, and I came back after a few days, and water had flooded my kitchen. Because the water line didn't just not work, it was broken. And so then I had to call a repair person to do the job that I would have had to do in the first place, but also, now that the line was completely broken, had to replace the whole line. I needed a cleanup crew to deal with the kitchen, and then we had to bring specialists in to make sure that there wasn't water all throughout our floorboards. If the person had said to me, if the first tech that I ever brought over had said, instead of saying, your water line is broken, if they had said, your water line is broken, which can lead to a leak that could flood your kitchen and damage your floorboards, I would have understood why this, does this really matter? The answer was, yes, it actually does really matter, but I didn't know that. And so you have to make sure people understand what's at stake so that they're willing to engage with the rest of the talk.
What's question number 3?
Question number 3. So first we have, should I pay attention to this? Second, does this really matter? The third question that people always ask is, but why should I listen to you? So at this point, they're bought into the topic of the talk. They know it's relevant to them, and they actually understand that it's worth solving. The problem is we now live in an age, it's not like 1975 anymore. It's not even 2008 anymore. We are now in an age where the world's most foremost experts on basically every topic are just a click away. Or ChatGPT, or Claude, or AI, or whatever. You can get an expert's answer or all, like an aggregate of all experts in the world's answer right in your pocket. So why would I listen to this person I've never heard of for the next 45 minutes when I can just look it up so easily later? Which means you have to answer the question, why should I listen to you specifically? And the answer to that is always a story. You have to tell a story, a quick one, a short one, a tight one, but a story that indicates to the audience, I have a unique perspective on this topic that you can't get from anywhere else. I speak on human connection as a personal brand, right? When I'm not doing this message design, speech writing stuff, I speak on human connection. Why wouldn't somebody, when I walk up on stage and they go, funny former magician with weird eyebrows, like, why would you listen to me? Why wouldn't they just Google Brene Brown and see what she said about connection, or Simon Sinek, or anybody else? And it's like, it's actually because I tell a story about a time when I realized I was not connecting with people as a magician, and how I learned to connect with a blind guy in a restaurant through magic. As soon as I tell that story, people go, there's something that this guy knows, he's experienced, his perspective, that I could not get from anybody but him. Therefore, I'm going to listen to him, see what he has to say about this.
So I have to ask.
Yes.
Why would we listen to you on the topic of writing a keynote?
Yeah, why would you? It's a great question.
What's that origin story?
Yeah, why would you listen to me on this topic? So essentially, when I was a full-time magician for a decade, and then I got invited to give a TEDx talk, right? And I had no idea what I was doing. I just kind of threw some stuff together, did my best, panicked, and then gave my TEDx talk, and it exploded. It went mega viral in the early days of the TEDx program, millions of views, in an era where it was impossible to get those kind of views. Those are now very normal views on YouTube, but I was recognized in airports. It was really, truly people like, oh my God, did you give a TED talk? And it was incredibly bizarre, like for a brief window. The thing is, as a result of that TEDx talk, I started getting invited all over the world to speak at major conferences from major brands. And I was freaking out because they were treating me as an expert on human connection, which I absolutely wasn't. I remember I was thinking to myself, I have precisely 14 minutes and 12 seconds to say about that topic, and you already watched it, right? It was in the TED Talk. But I started saying yes to these, because how can you say no to that? And they wanted me to talk for an hour, right? A keynote, a real keynote. They were asking me for an hour. And so I had to sit down to write a keynote, and I kind of opened up a blank page, because I thought, well, a TED Talk, this is not the same thing, obviously. That was 14 minutes and 12 seconds. This is an hour. So I opened up a blank page and kind of tried to recreate the magic from scratch. Mm-hmm. And I started giving those keynotes, and the results were fine. It was fine. I was really coasting on my ability to be funny, be engaging. I used a lot of magic tricks. I told funny stories. I did audience interaction. I was coasting on my charisma, on my entertainers, all the assets I had as an entertainer. But people did not react after those keynotes the way they had to my TED Talk. And I did a handful of them, and I started going, this isn't it. Something was different in the TED Talk. So I went back to the TED Talk, opened up the script, and went, is there something here that I did that I'm not doing in the keynotes? And what I kind of found was a structure that I had followed that I was no longer doing, because I was treating this like 60 minutes as somehow this completely different thing. And so I organized the structure and then rewrote my keynote to just follow the same structure, just longer. And then it started working. And the keynotes started crushing, and people started walking up and going, we need you at our event, and we need to refer you to somebody. And people were following me and DMing me and going, I used what you taught me in this thing, and here's how it changed my life. And I had a good conversation with my father, who I've been estranged to for years, and those kind of things. And so because of that, when years later somebody randomly emailed me on the internet that I had never heard of and said, your TED Talk is one of my all-time favorite TED Talks. I've been invited to give my first ever TEDx talk. Have you ever coached anybody? Can you teach me? Again, say yes first, figure it out later. Sure, of course, I do it all the time, whatever, right? Totally nonsense. I wanted to see if I could do it. And all I did was all I knew to do was take them through the same structure that I had used in my TED Talk, that I had now used in my keynotes. I did that. Her talk got 250,000 views. She was able to quit her 9 to 5 and open a bespoke consulting firm of her own. She now employs like 30 people. She gave my name to somebody else. I did it for them. It worked again. And at some point, I started realizing there's a magic in this structure. And I started to go, what exactly am I doing in this structure? Why is it working? And the punchline is it finally clicked. I'm just doing what magicians do when they build magic tricks. I've designed a keynote according to the structure of a magic trick because magicians have to get you to believe something that you know isn't true, you know isn't possible, and yet somehow make you believe it's happening anyway. If a magician can get you to believe something that you absolutely know isn't true, then why not use that when we're selling our ideas?
Okay, so we know why we should listen to you.
Yeah.
What do we do next?
Yeah, so what happens next is almost everybody makes an incredibly classic mistake. Speakers go right from essentially the problem, and then they jump straight to the solution. They go, great. Almost none of them even tell a story that qualifies them, like we just said, but let's say they do. Even when they do, they go, great, now here's my solution. Here's my 4-step framework. Here's my proprietary methodology. Here's what we're developing in the lab. Here's our, whatever it is, right? Scientists might go, let me tell you all about our special animal tracking technology, right? They're not ready. They're not ready because if you give them a solution without context of all of the other things people think will work but don't, they have no way to judge whether your solution is worthwhile, is going to work for them, is too hard, is likely to work, whatever. And so they now ask a question, which is some version of, why can't I just keep doing what I'm already doing? There's things that I've tried to solve this problem. There's things I've heard of, I've thought of trying, I've seen other people do. Why can't I just do those things? Because I would always rather do something I'm already aware of than something I've never heard of. And whatever you're going to say is probably something they've never heard of. So they ask the question, why can't I keep doing what I'm already doing? And we have to basically take them on a tour of what we call the status quo. We have to go, here are the kinds of things that people think will work, try to do, have heard of, and why they either don't work as well as they should, or work, but only short term and lead to unintended or unforeseen negative consequences long term. We have to remove all of the possible ways that people might try to solve this problem so that when you eventually give them your actual solution, they have no other options. There's nothing left. And this comes directly from magic. This is just Magician 101. And once we're there, they are now finally going to, if you have answered the question, why can't I keep doing what I've already been doing? They're going to ask themselves, basically, fine, so what's the solution? And this is the only moment that you should not answer the audience's question. Everything else in this system is built on answering the question they're actually asking. The problem is they're still not ready for the solution. This is now they think they want the solution. What they actually need is a paradigm shift. You need to change how they think before they will change what they do. People will not do something new unless they think in a new way, right? And so what we have to do is some version of, it's not this, it's that. The problem is not X, the problem is Y. And if you just got really like, ChatGPT, right? If you just had that like, cringe AI, we are now living in an age where a lot of us are really allergic to that it's not X, it's Y kind of framing. And that's because ChatGPT and LLMs, they do it every other sentence. I have a solution for you. Don't do it every other sentence. Do it once in the talk. One time per idea, essentially. Exactly. One time per idea. Help the audience think differently. I was in a workshop with my hero turned mentor, Seth Godin, many years ago, learning about freelancers. And I was complaining on one of these group calls about some clients that were really hard to work with. And at some point, Seth, he stopped me, he stopped us, and he said, but why would you work with people that are hard to work with? And he goes, you're self-employed. You get to choose your clients. Why would you work with people who are hard to work with? It broke my brain because in that moment, what he did is he said, you're self-employed. Your clients don't choose you. You choose your clients. Flip. He changed the way I thought about client acquisition or lead generation. What most people would have done if I had been on that group call and it was not Seth Godin, if it had been some, LinkedIn expert, they wouldn't have said that. What they would have said is, let me teach you a framework for how to write LinkedIn posts that convinces people, that gets the right people on your discovery calls. Let me look at the intake form they would have gone to solution. They would have gone tactics. And I wouldn't have done it because I didn't think differently about it yet. Seth didn't give me any of that. He didn't give me any solutions. What he gave me was a new way of thinking. And now that I'm thinking differently about client acquisition, it turns out finding the solutions is actually the easy part. But I would have never been willing to look for those solutions or implement them had I not been thinking, I choose my clients. That's a new way of thinking. And now I can find out what the tactics are. The tactics are easy.
So a little side note here from our structure. How would we be thinking differently after reading your book?
Yeah, so the entire conceit of this book is basically design beats delivery every time. In other words, when most people struggle to give speeches or they give a talk that doesn't work as well as they hoped it would, or it doesn't land, or they can see people are not getting it, or they hope people would buy their thing or support their thing or give them funds or whatever it is, and they don't. Most people think it's me. They go, it's me. I'm not funny enough. I'm not engaging enough. I'm not interesting enough. My topic's not interesting enough. I'm not charismatic. It's all that they go, it's me, it's me, it's me. And I'm here to tell you, it's not you. It's not the speaker. It's the speech. If you get the design of the speech right, if you design it perfectly, you can actually be kind of boring. You can just almost monotone this thing. It's not that it's fun to listen to somebody in a monotone. It's not. But if you think about times of, say, crisis, so there's a crisis in the world. There's been a big one but there's been a lot of them in the last few years. Pick your favorite crisis. And if you're scared, if you're genuine, if you're worried, you're scared for your family, and you're glued to the TV or YouTube or whatever you're looking at, and some expert, some scientist, some politician, some whatever, gets up in front of a microphone on camera and simply reads a statement, if what they're telling you is relevant, it matters to you, they help you think in a new way about the thing that you're worried about, if the content of what they're saying is really useful and actionable, I don't care at all if they're boring. It doesn't matter. I don't need them to be funny and engaging in the performance sense. Because if it really matters and it's structured well and it answers my questions, I can follow you. Meanwhile, if you've ever seen a traditional speaker, like a keynote, like a motivational speaker, for the first 5 minutes, they're funny, they're engaging, they're exciting, they're doing jump kicks, you're laughing, it's great. But after about 3 to 5 minutes is about what people will get. And then you just start to go, is there anything happening here? Am I getting anything from this? And so at some point, someone who's a terrific performer but isn't saying anything useful to you, they're actually just kind of annoying. Meanwhile, I will follow a boring, quote unquote, presenter through an engaging speech, no problem. Given the choice, I'd rather have both. Always rather have both. But most of the people that I work with, that we talk to, they don't have time to become, magicians, entertainers, comedians, engaging presenters. It's hard to do. It's hard to train people to do that. I wasn't a natural at that. It took me a decade of my life on stage for thousands and thousands of audiences to get good at that. Somebody, you get a scientist who's got to give a talk in 3 weeks in front of politicians who might be able to fund the research that they're doing for the next 10 years. I don't have time to turn them into an engaging presenter, and they don't have time to learn. So this book is to say, because your question was, what's the shift in thinking? Mm-hmm. It's, if you have to choose, design beats delivery every time.